Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Boston Globe reporter and Report for America Corps member, Tiana Woodard, welcome back to The Common. Wow, quick turnaround.
I know, it's so quick. It's not a year this time. I'm happy.
Hey, I told you we were going to work on that, and look at us.
Wow, y'all are already hitting those New Year's resolutions better than I am.
You know, come on. Well, Tiana, the first time we talked to you, you told me black folks were leaving Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Then, last time we talked, last week, you told me another Walgreens in a black community is closing. And now you have a story out about how black churches are leaving the city. What gives?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you were looking at for your last piece about the black churches and what you found.
Yeah, so I remember I first came across this story when I was just speaking with elders in the community, and one had just mentioned to me, oh yeah, I go to Concord Baptist. That used to be in the South End, but we couldn't park anymore, so now we're in Milton. I was like, wait, so you're telling me that just churches are just moving? Like, I had never, just growing up, you could see restaurants closing, stores closing, but the churches where I was or whatever I've seen, they've always stayed no matter what. In the best times and the worst times, they've always been in the same place. And so that just really made me think more about, like, why is this happening? And it kind of became this bigger story where over the past 20 years or so, at least about a dozen of the 100 plus black churches in Boston had closed or moved for whether it was parking, gentrification, cost of living, upkeep costs, just being closer to the congregations. There were just a bunch of different things that kind of fed into this trend.
Wow. Tell us about some of the churches you covered for this story.
What I really honed in on for this story were the Black Baptist churches, African-American churches that have been in the South End and then in Roxbury for well over 150 years at some points. A lot of them had been there ever since enslaved people that moved to the North or that were fleeing slavery or that were recently emancipated. They started gathering in like homes, and then they were able to like fundraise a bunch of money and buy a church building like in the South End or Roxbury. And that was definitely the case for Ebenezer Baptist Church, which they had been in the South End in the same building for well over 100 years. And they had their final service in the South End in 2020, I believe. And they now have just purchased a new building, what used to be like a catering hall or a function hall in Abington. And they're hoping to start new and kind of start a new chapter for themselves, hopefully this summer if everything goes to plan. And I also focused on Concord Baptist Church, who's been like in Milton, kind of close to the Mattapan-Milton line along Blue Hill Parkway for about 10 years at this point. And then New Hope Baptist Church, thankfully, they've still been able to stay within city lines, but they came from the South End to Hyde Park about 10 years ago, too. And what's come of these like original buildings that they used to stay at or been for decades, they're either have already become market rate apartments or condos, or they're being constructed like Ebenezer, and their estimated like sale price is well over $1 million for each unit.
I mean, I know one should not assume, but I'm assuming that these churches having to leave the city and some having to move to different places within the city has a lot to do with gentrification.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that one pastor I spoke with for the story, one thing that he really said that stood out for me is that we weren't ministering to the same communities anymore. it was kind of like, well, if this church is
Mm.
staying in this neighborhood, and it kind of looks like night and day if you were to look back 50 years when it was in its heyday to now. A lot of them are really wondering, will people get the same spirituality or the same benefits of having a church in their backyard like they used to? And they thought it was best to move closer to where their congregates were and where the communities that would benefit the most, where they could be closest to that.
Mm. Now, you touched on this earlier, but I want to come back to this. Where exactly are they going? What type of cities or communities are they choosing to set up shop in?
Yeah, so they're choosing the cities where their congregations have been displaced or been moving to. Like a lot of Black Bostonians, like I remember a few months ago or about a year ago at this point, I did a story about how most of Black Boston, like it's grown, but more of it kind of lives in the suburbs or outside of the actual Boston proper. So a lot of these congregations or these churches are moving to like Brockton, Randolph, Stoughton, Abington. And if they are able to stay within the city, they might be going to like Hyde Park or Dorchester or places where land is a little bit more spread out, at least for the city. Another like interesting thread is that a lot of these churches are like buying Catholic properties that were sold after everything that happened with the Catholic Church in the early 2000s, and Jewish synagogues that kind of used to be along Blue Hill Avenue and in Dorchester, Mattapan. So there's a lot of moving parts to it.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back with more from Tiana Woodard of the Boston Globe. Did you talk to any members of congregations whose church left?
Yeah, I sat in on so many services. It was really fun to see. And I spoke with so many people that had been a part of these historic churches for decades. And the general consensus that I got is that they were really excited and saw the new opportunities and the possibilities that came with being in a new building where it was like more land to have outdoor events, or being able to have like a state-of-the-art kitchen and being able to give out food to the community and stock things for donations or for giving back. But there was still like this sense of loss and just a mourning or a yearning for what used to be. Like being able to go to your church that's a block from your home and being able to have your neighbors all beside each other and having that church all and within walking distance to each other. It's like, it was a great new chapter, but it's not the same. It's not the same, and there are some things that you lose when you do move.
Yeah, talk about some of those things you lose.
From what I got, the big thing that you really lose is community and camaraderie. I think one thing that really stood out to me, I remember I went to one church about an hour before service, and one lady was telling me that she had been going to this church since, I believe, the 70s, or since she had moved to Boston from Alabama, and that she tries to go there at least an hour before so she can talk with all the her sisters, her church sisters and brothers, because now that everyone is kind of doesn't live in the South End anymore or doesn't live nearby, as soon as services are over, they do the final prayers, everyone's like getting into their cars and driving to where they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And you never had to worry about that if you lived a few minutes walk away or when everyone was in the same neighborhood. It's just those like that intimacy and that closeness and that community that comes with having a Black church that's in your backyard.
Yeah, and another aspect of the Black churches is it's not just a place of worship a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
It is a place for community and fellowship outside of religion, right? Like people get a lot of community support there.
Right. Yeah. When you lose a church, like you lose an advocate. I remember just looking through the archives and seeing like Ebenezer Baptist Church or 12th Baptist Church, which is still there, it's still in Roxbury, but these churches that decades ago at the height of the civil rights movement and different eras in Boston's history, like they've been able to advocate for affordable housing to stay in the community, or they would have other properties where they were able to have like housing for people that were in need, or they were able to prevent like a liquor store or some business that they didn't look upon favorably from being there. It was just having that institution there that spoke power and was able to really advocate on community members' behalves.
What, if anything, is the city doing about this?
Yeah, I would just say as a whole, I think the city, because I think the story of Black churches is a story of affordability, a story of housing, a story of gentrification. I know that the city as a whole, like all departments, have really thought about just the side effects or the consequences of that, and Black churches is definitely one. I know that the city's like faith-based liaison, Willie Dickerson III, he has really been working with these churches on the ground and hearing their concerns and trying to figure out how we can help them stay in the city. But I know, like, also on the ground, these churches have really, I think, in this moment, come together and realize that collaboration and working together is really a way for survival, whether it's like having joint services or anything to make sure that people are able to worship nearby. They're really doing everything they can to in this moment.
What kind of message can we take away from this? What does this tell us about how Boston is changing more broadly?
That's a good question. What this made me realize is that Boston's cost of living and this affordability crisis isn't just having like the immediate effects of not being able to afford a home or being able to afford rent or most of your paycheck going towards it. It's really trickling into every part of our lives, and that includes religion and culture and history. Geronzi Harris, who's the leader for the Black Church Fidelity Project here in Boston, I think she put it really well when she told me that when you lose a Black church, this just shows that this affordability crisis that we're losing financial, like social, cultural capital as a result of it with each Black church that leaves the city.
Tiana, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and sharing your work with us, because, you know, you're giving us something to think about for sure. So thank you so very much.
I'm happy to be here again. You had really good questions.
Aw, thanks.
It's what we do.
That's Boston Globe reporter Tiana Woodard. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Folks, if you like what you're hearing, go to wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, whatever it may be. Rate and review us. Let us know how you're liking the show. We would really appreciate it. Also, if you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common, or you can send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.